This podcast is sponsored by Active Skin Repair, a skin health company helping people heal with natural, non-toxic, medical-grade ingredients. Honestly, it's only the one first aid supply we have right now because Active Skin Repair can be used to treat a wide range of skin issues, including cuts and scrapes and burns and sunburn, which is huge here in Arizona, rashes and other types of skin damage. It's also safe and non-toxic, making it suitable for use on all skin types. I use it on my son's mosquito bites all the time. And it can even be used on rosacea and eczema and acne-prone skin.
Yeah, it's crazy. And seriously, with over 500,000 happy customers and thousands of 5-star reviews and ingredients that are safe and clean and can be used from your youngest member of your household all the way up to your oldest, everybody has one simple solution for all of your family's skincare needs.
So go visit www.activeskinrepair.com to learn more about Active Skin Repair and get 20% off your order. Use code NOGUILT. That's activeskinrepair.com to get 20% off your order. Use the code NOGUILT.
It's like taking complete responsibility for ourselves, those feelings of discomfort, the way that we're made to feel bad, and saying, I recognize what's happening in my body and my feeling, and I'm going to sit with this and understand it, and I'm not going to project it onto other women and other safe targets.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I'm your host, Joanne Crode, here with the lovely Brie Tucker.
Why, hello, everybody. How are you?
Oh, we have the greatest episode today. In fact, if you're new to the No Guilt Mom podcast, this is the one to listen to. This is the one to listen to. I read her book, and then Brie, your face just lit up in the first 2 minutes of this interview with unbelievableness.
I kept track. My mind was blown 7 times during that podcast. 7 times she laid down info that I was like, holy mackerel. No.
Yeah.
Boom. So yeah.
She has the best book. It was recommended to me by one of our Balance members. Shout out to Lauren Kerwin, who recommended the book On Our Best Behavior. And let me introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Elise Loehnen, and she's the host of the podcast Pulling the Thread and author of the New York Times Bestseller On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins, and the Price Women Pay to Be Good. She functions as a cultural therapist, pulling together different schools of thought and themes to get a more comprehensive understanding of what's driving us. And oh my gosh, get ready. If your mind is blown, the number of times Breeze was, this is going to be a great listen. So let's get on with the show. You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I'm super excited to have you here. I read your book a few months ago after it was recommended by one of our Balance members. And as soon as I read it, I oh my gosh, we have to have her on because you have basically tied a lot of my fears and a lot of things that I see in other women holding them back to something we just accepted as truth in the 7 deadly sins. So I'm super excited to get into it. Okay. First, background knowledge. I was raised Catholic. I went to an Episcopalian school. So the 7 deadly sins really played prominently into everything I saw during my childhood. What first really drew me into your book is your explanation of how the 7 deadly sins actually rose to prominence in religion. Yeah. Can you tell us the story about the monk who went to the island?
Yeah. I mean, it's the sins are so wild. As someone who, my father's Jewish, my mom calls herself a recovering Catholic, but I was raised in a almost completely secular household. I went to an Episcopalian high school as well. And so when I was first determining what is this goodness that is so pervasive in the lives of women, this quote unquote goodness that we're chasing, good mother, good friend, so on and so forth. Where did this even come from? And essentially that investigation led me to something that seemed quite culturally obvious, the 7 deadly sins. So then, of course, I'm like, where were they in the Bible? And that's when I realized that they weren't, which is shocking to most people. Shocking. They were never sort of handed down in the Old Testament or by Jesus as these edicts or rules. They actually first got sort of turned into a list in the 4th century. This monk named Evagrius Ponticus, an ascetic monk who fled to the desert after having an affair with a married woman. He was a wealthy man.
So
And
it's
he
been
wrote
going
them
on for a long
down.
time, this behavior.
It's
is
been
what I'm
going on for
hearing.
a long time. Yes. And he wrote this little chapbook of prayer called Practicos, and they were bits of scripture to be used against, he called them demons, but it had a different connotation then as more of something that would distract you or keep you out of prayer. And there were 8 of them, including sadness, which I include in my book. So he writes this little chapbook. Obviously, there weren't a lot of books flying around at that point. He's also, just for any Enneagram fans, an early father of the Enneagram as well, because that's when they became associated. Each Enneagram type is associated with a vice. And
Okay, this
is.
is just like your
Mhm.
whole. We have only been recording for 3 minutes, and my mind has already been blown
I know, right?
repeatedly.
Right. Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Could you see why I was so excited? Can you
Oh,
see?
no, Joanna's been like a kid before Christmas. Like, oh my God, it's coming up. It's coming up.
yeah. Okay, so he writes them down, and then they're passed amongst these desert fathers like John Cassian, etc. And then in 590 AD, Pope Gregory I turns them into the cardinal vices. He drops sadness, and they become the cardinal vices. And then Aquinas, they become part of sort of Catholicism very specifically and are written about a lot. And I'm going to tell you the story of this homily when he creates them too. So in the New Testament, Mary Magdalene is written about as the one from whom Jesus cast 7 demons. And nobody ever says what those demons are. Again, that word has a slightly different connotation than how we interpret it in a modern way. Some theologians say, oh, he was balancing her chakras, which I like that interpretation. So that's how Mary Magdalene is referred to in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, she's referred to as the one to whom Jesus resurrects after he is crucified. And there's this beautiful heretical gospel, the Gospel of Mary, which is her recounting this first teaching, which it's very beautiful. Anyway, that was destroyed, only recovered maybe a century ago. And she would really theoretically be the first apostle before Peter, if we follow this idea of sort of primacy of teaching. She was referred to as his best student, etc. So in 590, taking you back to Pope Gregory I in this homily, he says, these are the 7 cardinal vices. These are the same thing. These are the demons that Jesus cast out of Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is the same woman who anoints Jesus's feet with her hair, different woman, but he says same woman, and that woman is a prostitute. And that's how Mary Magdalene earned the reputation as a penitent prostitute and then was painted as a penitent prostitute, clutching at Jesus as he is ascending. She's shown sort of in red, clutching. And she wore that reputation until the 80s, when the Pope at the time said, oh, she wasn't actually a prostitute. And then in 2016, Pope Francis said, oh, she was the apostle to the apostles.
My
Okay, not
gosh.
being Catholic, I'm out
Isn't
of this.
that wild?
This is the first I've heard this. I didn't know that they had like cleared her reputation.
I didn't know they cleared it either, actually. It was not very well known in Catholic circles, like at all. They
Yeah.
did not talk about that. She was always the prostitute to me before I read your book.
Isn't that wild? Meanwhile, like besides Mother Mary, like the rightful first apostle.
Okay, I love the movie Dogma. Have either of you guys seen that movie?
Yes.
No,
Okay, well,
I haven't.
good luck. I mean, Harry Weinstein owns the rights, and so they won't stream it and they won't make it on DVD anymore. I have a DVD copy, so next time you cross over to Arizona, come by my house. I'll let you watch it on DVD. I digress. In it, they talk about how like biased the Bible is and how women are painted so terribly and how there's not even a woman apostle in there and everything. So that, what you said just blew I'm like, oh my God. Wow.
No. Women were actually far more prominent and very prominent in early Christianity, too. There's Junia. Her name was later, some people then translated her name and made her into a man.
Not
But
a
it's,
shocker.
I mean, Jesus was actually, if you read him, like a feminist. But then when you look into the mistranslations of the Bible, there's this man, he wrote like misquoting Jesus, Bert. I think he used, what's his name? Is a professor, I want to say, at Princeton. But there are more mistakes in the sort of New Testament than there are words because of just translation errors. And then people at various times making it more anti Semitic or making it misogynistic through translation. And yeah,
That
it's pretty
it's just
interesting.
so wild how, like, the real history does not line up with the history being told to us currently in, like, especially the evangelical Christian movement, how it's mostly like men
Mm-mm.
are leading and women are subservient. It wasn't that way. It was like history
No,
was rewritten.
no, but there are also amazing women in that movement who I think are sort of becoming these really important leaders who either have left and have deconstructed their faith and reconstructed it in a much
Mhm.
more sort of loving, intentional,
Mhm.
original way. And also are sort of like poking holes in this idea of patriarchy as passed down by actual gospel. When you go back and you look, it's like, no, not so much. It's quite far from Jesus wandering around the desert with 12 people, no church, saying you don't need a church. Like, this is your church. Your church is,
Yeah.
I'm not good at quoting gospel, but like, it's not, this isn't exactly what he asked for, or this wasn't his goal. You know, he rode
Yeah.
around on a donkey.
Okay, I have to say, like, one of my favorite gifts I have bought for my daughter, and I wanted it for me, but they didn't have it in an adult size. Picture of Jesus, like in that typical Catholic, like, ah, and it said, "I never said that." And I
I never
feel
said
Yeah.
that.
because I feel like that I grew up Southern Baptist, and I just feel like there are so many things that no, no, that is not what
No.
they meant. That is so not what was
No,
meant.
that is not what he
Like
said.
what you see
And
So
now is not, yeah.
no. And yet I feel like people who deep Christians, and again, I wasn't raised sort of, I've never gone to church and I'm unaffiliated, but I love Jesus. I love Mary Magdalene. And I love people like Father Richard Rohr, or they're just these incredible Christians who
Mhm.
also are pushing really hard against the way that it's been politicized, the way that it is being brandished like a whip, particularly against the people that Jesus was ultimately trying to protect. And I don't know if you guys have seen that unbelievable encounter, congressman in Texas taking on a woman, the person who's trying to get the 10 Commandments reinstated in schools.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway,
Mhm.
it's so beautiful. And he is essentially quoting scripture at her and talking about how essentially like evil this is and how anti-Christian. So it's, I don't know. I have hope that all the wonderful Christians will help us,
Raise above this.
will create some balance to go to your mission.
Well, I want to talk more about how having these 7 deadly sins in our lives has affected us as women today, and we're going to get into that right after this.
Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. I have to tell you guys, if you are a woman over 40 like I am, and you have started dealing with some crazy stuff like hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, vaginal dryness, weight gain, all of these things that you just are like, what the heck is happening to my body? I'm here to tell you, you don't have to accept it as another part of aging. All of these symptoms can actually be related to perimenopause and menopause. And yes, it can start in your 40s, but I have found a solution. MIDI Health. Seriously, this place is amazing. You can have virtual visits. Their clinicians are experts in menopause. They understand the frustrations and they also have full range of care options for you. Schedule a virtual visit and you'll come out of the experience feeling heard and with a plan that will work for you. Book your appointment with MIDI Health today. Visit joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
I am a water connoisseur and I cannot handle it when it doesn't taste good.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I will
Ugh.
like toss out water that I'm like, no, that's not good.
And that is why we feel like you guys have got to check out AquaTrue. AquaTrue purifiers use a 4-stage reverse osmosis purification process. And their countertop purifiers, they work with no installation or plumbing. I mean, that makes it work for even me. It removes 15 times more contaminants than your ordinary water pitcher filters and are specifically designed to combat chemicals in your water supply.
And they have water purifiers to fit every type of home, from installation-free countertop purifiers to higher capacity under the sink options. They even have a Wi-Fi connected purifier and mineral boost options. Yeah, it's really cool. So AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and even makes a great gift. Today, our listeners, you receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to AquaTrue, that's AQUATRU.com and enter code NGM at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to AquaTrue.com and use promo code NGM.
So in our house, meal planning is a huge headache.
Mine too.
My husband and I like to eat more low carbs, kind of keto, but my daughter, well, you know her, she's a bit picky. HelloFresh has a new program called Build a Plate Meals. They are designed to let every member of your household create their perfect plate. So I have no more headaches trying to find a meal to accommodate everybody. I just find parts for everybody in the meal. And HelloFresh makes it so easy that everybody will enjoy what I'm making. And I am like so looking forward to trying out the Fiesta spiced chicken with avocado salsa and roasted sweet potatoes this week.
What I love is like HelloFresh's easy to follow recipes include pre-portioned ingredients.
And Green Chef and Every Plate, who you've heard us talk about before, they are now owned by HelloFresh. And now with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, I mean, seriously, there is something for everyone.
I have to mention, for a limited time, kids eat free. They eat free. So go to HelloFresh.com/NGM Kids to unlock this exclusive offer. 1 free kids meal per box for 2 months while your subscription is active. That's free kids meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/NGM Kids.
HelloFresh, it's America's #1 meal kit.
So talking about the 7 deadly sins, Elise, like I mentioned, I went to an Episcopalian school, and it's funny because I was recently telling my mom this, and I'm like, Mom, did you know that in school they had us go to confession? And she's like, yeah, I knew that. I'm like, but did you know, like as a 3rd grader, they gave me a list of sins and they were numbered. And I remember that the list getting passed off, and then you just checked off the sins that you committed so that when you went and knelt behind the father who wasn't facing you, Father Eldridge, I remember. And he was like, tell me, child, how have you sinned? And I'm like, 1, 5, 6. Like, that's how the confession went in our school.
Oh my
Um,
God. At like 8?
yeah, it started very early. It started in 3rd grade, 4th grade. Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. But these sins have been a part of like my life, and I know so many women's lives for so long. And so when I was reading your book, the sin that first like really stuck out to me was envy. And
Yes.
how envy is something that really stops us. And it's so hard for women to actually use envy to their good. So, can you talk a little bit about envy and how we can like reuse it?
Yeah. Oh, Joanne, that's so wild. But this
It
is,
is wild.
and it's, in some ways, it's like healthy that you have such an overt example in your life that you can point to, because I think for so many women, it's far more insidious where they would say, I
Mhm.
don't believe in any of this stuff. I wasn't raised in a church. My parents didn't talk to me about sinning. This doesn't apply to me. But what's so amazing about this list, I'm just going to say them quickly and then let's talk about envy, sloth, pride, envy, greed, gluttony, lust, anger, and then sadness, which I write about as sort of what is happening to men. But you think about them and you're like, oh my God, this is a checklist of goodness specifically for women. Men are not policing themselves according to these sins. They're just not. And men have no compunction, in my experience and in my immediate family, about feeling like they certainly deserve rest and they deserve a drink and some Netflix and some peace and some quiet, right?
That is what they feel like they deserve, yes.
Yeah. Women are like, I should just be doing something and I'm going to like hover and sit for 5 minutes and then I'm going to go and do something else. And there's all this doing that needs to be done. And moms in particular, but all women really have been trained well in subjugating their wants to other people's needs, which gets us to envy. I was interviewing, this is a long time ago, but therapist Lori Gottlieb, who wrote this amazing book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And she has this small aside in her book, which is that she tells her clients to pay attention to their envy because it shows them what they want. And this was before I had this idea for this book. And I was thinking about this and I was like, oh my God, it hit me in two places very deeply. I couldn't stop thinking about this. And the first was, ooh, envy, gross. I would never, not me. I do not envy anyone. It's so malicious and icky. So, of course, I was like, oh, I must be runneth over with envy for me to have that much of a triggered response. And then, second, I was like, I couldn't tell you what I want. I have no idea. I've been living my life on autopilot and I drive my life according to again, meeting the needs of other people, my two boys, my husband, my
You get told what
job.
you want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I couldn't articulate it. I could not articulate it. And it freaked me out. And so then I realized, okay, if these two things are so related, then my envy is a guide. If it's a guide for what I want, then I need to start with sort of the unconscious apparatus of envy, which is the way that it shows up. I think particularly in women, again, because we've been conditioned not to have any wants at all. We don't know what's happening. This is an unconscious process. We see someone, typically another woman, who has something or is doing something that we want. We feel incredibly uncomfortable. She makes us feel bad. And the instinct is to say, she's making me feel bad. She is bad. And we project that bad feeling onto her. And so we start deprecating
Yep.
and criticizing and judging other women. And we say things like, I just don't like her. She rubs me the wrong way.
Mhm.
Who does she think she is? When really it's why her and not me. And I would never allow myself to do that. And so therefore she should not do it too. And so we get into this terrible cycle of policing each other and making each other small. And I write too about how envy is very correlated with pride. Being seen is very dangerous for women, and scarcity, which is part of the greed chapter. But we recognize that once we become aware of it, you will see this pattern everywhere. And it is so socially condoned. And so
It
what you
is.
do, yeah, you just notice and you're like, oh, she is making me so uncomfortable. There's so much information here. She is pointing to a dream I have for myself. This is my soul knocking. Like, what is present? Is it that I am envious of her body? Am I envious of her relationship or her well behaved children who read books? Am I envious of her career? What is it? And you just start that process and you start training yourself to be comfortable with the discomfort, which then moves very quickly, by the way. And you don't have to make yourself feel bad by being mean. And you get so much more information and insight into that wanting.
Isn't one of the hardest things that we have these days, though, is being comfortable with that discomfort?
Yes. I mean, we live in a culture of numbing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As a society as a whole, like we're used to instant gratification and being able to do away with things. And like that's, as someone who's
Yes.
struggling with anxiety, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, not easy.
It's a process for sure. I after I read the envy chapter, and it really keyed me into like, okay, when I have this feeling towards other women, I need to like dig into that a little bit more. So I'm just gonna be very vulnerable right here. There's this other woman who I constantly tell Bree, she rubs me the wrong way. I can't stand her. What is she doing? Like everything. And when I looked into it, I was like, you know what? I am envious of something that she has. And also, like when she says stuff that rubs me the wrong way, I'm like, actually a little envious that she actually says her own needs to me to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that she's taken care of, because that's something that I have trouble doing. I have trouble telling people exactly what I want and I think, because I'm afraid that they'll like disassociate from me. And I have to say, Elise, your book has helped me so much in that regard, because right before we got on this podcast, I was telling Bree about like this text thread I'm on with a lot of moms at my son's school. And we had a conversation at brunch because they went back to school already. It's July and they already went back to school on Wednesday.
We've
Yeah, no,
modified
true
year
story.
round. I'll preface
True
it with
story.
that. Yeah.
So we had a brunch on Wednesday. And during that brunch, we were talking about mom guilt and like we really need to do more things for ourselves. And so one of the women was like, hey, I can discount tickets on like a baseball game. And like the whole thread was silent. And some were like, oh, I can't make it that weekend. And I just look at that and I'm like, I don't like baseball. Like, what do I do here? And I went forward and I'm like, hey, I don't like baseball games and I fear I'm going to be grumpy if I go there, but I want to hang out. What can we do? And it was because of that little jaunt into envy, I was able to figure out, oh, this is something I want to be doing with my life and pushing that.
Yeah. No, and that like going into the sensing too, because I think so many of us override our bodies. So in that moment too, as someone makes a plan to say, take a pause and say, how does this feel? Like, is my energy rising at this idea? Is this like a full body yes for me? Or is this like, no, thanks? And then acting on it, right? Because so often we override every part of our body that's like, no.
I like how you said that, a full body yes. Right?
Yes.
Like
Full
my
body
head
yes.
says yes, but why is my stomach upset and my palms sweaty? Right?
Yeah. Or even like my head says, you should do this, or like, you need to do this, or this is the right thing to do. And of course, many of us, particularly moms, are doing stuff all day that's not a full body yes. But even acknowledging that and saying, I know I don't want to do this, but like my kids need lunch, so I'm going to make some lunch, is a more honoring approach than I'm going to smile and I'm going to I don't care what I want. Who cares?
And be grateful I have these kids and this wonderful house
Yeah.
and like all those things. I think it also ties into our likability, which like with another sin that actually comes right after envy, because I took notes on your book, at least I took all the notes, because I want to talk with you more about pride and especially how you talk about Anne Hathaway versus Jennifer Lawrence's acceptance speeches in your book. And we're going to get into that right after this.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.
When it comes to raising kids, there's so much to consider. Things like, what do we feed them? When do we feed them? How do they sleep? What does it look like to raise kind kids? How does their nervous system work? How do I keep myself calm? What are my triggers? There's so much that comes into play, and we are distilling all of that information for you at Voices of Your Village podcast, where we bring experts in the field of early childhood and education and psychology and across the board so that you don't have to comb the internet for information. You get to show up and hang out and have shame-free, judgment-free conversations and insights into what it looks like to raise kind, empathetic, emotionally intelligent humans. I'm Alyssa Blask Campbell. I have a master's degree in early childhood education. I'm a mom of 2, and I am walking this journey right alongside you doing this work. Come hang out with me at Voices of Your Village, and we can dive into real conversations with actionable tips.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
So pride, another of the sins we've grown accustomed. Like, we shouldn't brag about ourselves. We shouldn't like show that we're proud of our accomplishments. You have just the example of how our society sees women and pride with an Oscars acceptance speech. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So we all know, we've all been admonished to be humble. Don't get a big head. Don't be a tall poppy in a poppy field. You will lose your head. For women, this idea of standing out from a crowd is very dangerous. And we see this play out in our culture all the time. And it happens very visibly with celebrities, but it also happens with female founders. It happens in small communities where we watch a woman. So I wrote about, there's so many examples, and I'm sure people listening are like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. But I wrote about this particular moment in time when Anne Hathaway was nominated for an Oscar for Les Mis. And Jennifer Lawrence, I think it was Silver Linings Playbook. Jennifer Lawrence was this young ingenue who was on her way up, and we'd had enough of Anne Hathaway. And there were all these Hatha haters, is what they were called, who just snarked at her for her earnestness and her she was trying too hard, ladies, and so grating. I don't remember. I mean, I'm sure people listening can remember sort of the general hate of Anne Hathaway.
I don't remember the words, but I do remember that vibe. Very
Of
much
just like,
so.
ugh,
Yes. Again, I'm so
ick.
tired of her.
Go away, Anne Hathaway. I mean,
Yeah.
it's wild when you think about it, right? And so in this moment, she accepts an Oscar. She's wearing this cone boob dress that she apparently had to switch into because someone else was wearing the dress that she was supposed to wear. She wins the Oscar. She's cradling it. She feels so awkward, and everyone in the world hates her. And she says something to the effect of, "Oh, it came true."
I remember
And
this speech, yes.
this dream. Yeah.
It came
And
true. Yeah. She's
it
looking
came
for
true.
Oscar.
And this, yeah. And
Yeah.
she just got destroyed for the dress, for just being so cringy. And we didn't really hear from her for a while. She's sort of now, this is so many years ago,
Reemerging,
now
yeah.
is sort of, people can reflect on it and say, why were we so mean to Anne Hathaway? But like, sent her into kind of hiding. And then meanwhile, Jennifer Lawrence was like tripping and falling down the stairs and so real. And I mean, I really like Jennifer Lawrence. So, but like, we just couldn't get enough of Jennifer Lawrence at that moment. And then since destroyed her, she reached that sort of apex and then came tumbling down the other side. But this is just a pattern. And so I think for all of us listening, it's important to be like, oh, I am participating in this unconscious sort of mob pattern. And I could say it doesn't really relate to me because like I'm not famous and I'm not rich and who cares? And these women don't deserve our sympathy. But what we miss in that is that this is a playbook. We are all learning. Our daughters are learning. Don't be seen. Do not be celebrated. It is dangerous. They will come for you. And this is happening. This happens.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Taylor Swift in this because my daughter's a huge Swiftie and she has brought me into it. So I know a ton about Taylor Swift, more than I'd ever thought I would, actually. And I really, really admire her and like her.
If I ever get taken to a Taylor Swift trivia night, you're coming with me.
Oh, yeah, I will come. I'll come. But something about Taylor Swift is you said like she has an army to protect her, but even I think she may have broken the pattern because they came after her as well. Right after 1989, it was the whole Kanye West backlash. And like he had his whole audience go like F Taylor Swift, F Taylor Swift, and she totally disappeared. And I feel like she's the one who broke the pattern because she's like, forget you all. I am posting an album. It was a complete diss track album, Reputation, where I am telling people, like, I don't care. This is how it is. She came out and she's like, there will be no explanation. There will just be Reputation. She refused to do any press on the album whatsoever. And she just came back fiery right after it instead of disappearing. And I feel like it's been like an upward trend ever since. Looking at your research and looking what's happened to women in the past, do you feel like that had anything to do with it?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think part of it, I think that we can break these patterns because, as mentioned, it doesn't happen to men. As more and more and more of us become conscious of what's operating in us, and the more that we say, okay, not today, even in the process of crisis, and when this happens, the response of women is typically, oh my God, I'm bad. These people think
Yeah.
I'm bad. I'm bad. And you could hear this in sort of Anne Hathaway owning that she knows she's annoying. I mean, just like, I know I'm annoying, whatever, all this talk. And so women immediately go into this, like, I'm bad and an apology tour, and then they remove themselves. We saw this in 2020 with all these business leaders who had started, we don't have that many women who are leading companies. And 2020 happened, and employees came out and said, you were mean and toxic. And I'm not suggesting that, maybe, I'm sure there was validity to some of these concerns
Mm-hmm.
and something certainly to look at and learn from and repair.
Mm-hmm.
But it was wild how it was like everyone went for the women, didn't go for the men.
When men were doing very bad things,
Bad thing, actual bad actions, like 10 Commandment
actual
bad action.
bad action that they were prosecuted against and found guilty.
Yeah. Because when women are conditioned and programmed for goodness, you just need to be bad. But when men are conditioned and programmed for power, they can do anything to maintain that power. And we don't really move on from them until we think that they're sort of weak, feminine, a quote unquote pussy.
Okay, so
Mhm.
I'm dying to ask, because if this is the system, and if we were to
Mhm.
believe like this is just a system, this is how society is, there's no way we can change it, that's depressing. So what are some of the things that we can do to kind of
Override our programming.
right, yeah, now we recognize it. Now we're like, oh, so that is why I say that about myself. It's because I've been like programmed to think that this is
Yeah.
a bad thing. What are some things we could do to get ourselves into a healthier mental health state and not be like, I suck, I have the 7?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's individual action and it's collective action. And the collective action is incredibly important because to go out as a woman and be sort of deviant, and it is very scary, and we're not going to accomplish much. So on the individual level, it's taking responsibility for ourselves and the way that we are complicit in perpetuating this system. It is not blaming sort of quote unquote the men or whatever it may be. I'm not saying that there aren't pernicious men amongst us, but that's been sort of the victim stance. This is happening to us and we can't do anything about it and we don't have as much power. Okay, that may be, but like nothing's going to change. Superman's not coming. So for us, it's taking complete responsibility for ourselves, those feelings of discomfort, the way that we're made to feel bad, and saying, I recognize what's happening in my body and my feeling, and I'm going to sit with this and understand it. And I'm not going to project it onto other women and other safe targets. So that's the first part, is just complete responsibility. Then it's being there with each other as we're going through this process and saying, okay, like we can go on venti walks with our best friends. I do this all the time. And we take turns raging, and then we shift and it's like, okay, why are you so upset? Let's talk about it. Like, what's happening in your body? What's happening? What is this other woman activating in you? Is there envy present? What is it? What is she doing that's, making you feel this way? So it's sort of that, again, working with each other and being present with each other to make this unconscious action more conscious. And then it's a question of not only not participating in these cultural moves against other women, because the research suggests that women are as hard on other women, if not harder on other women than men. And so it's taking responsibility for our complicity in that action as well, and being, again, present with ourselves in those moments and not perpetuating the problem, but saying like, pause, what's happening? Like, what is happening here? And I think if enough of us come online in that way, things could really start to shift, because women are amazing. I don't have to tell your audience this. We have been outperforming boys and men in school for a century. Yep. We are sort of long distance endurance animals. You look at any super long distance race and women win. We might not have as much immediate strength, but we have more endurance. We outlive men. We're certainly better multitaskers, let's be honest.
Yeah.
We're still connected to caring, which men have been sort of severed and dislocated from. We're generally much more in our feelings and in a good way. We're like boxers training at high altitude. So if we could actually get on side with each other and support men too. I have 2 boys. My book is not like a screed against men. It's about
No.
balance, and the world would change.
That's the thing that is so important for people to hear, because I want to reiterate 2 things you said that here at No Guilt Mom we very much agree in. One, women have agency over this. It is not men's fault that they're doing everything in their homes, they're taking over everything. You have control on changing this dynamic.
Yes.
There is control. There's extreme situations of abuse, and of course that are out of control. But women, for the most part, they have control in this. And the second part is that our men and boys, they are suffering as well, because they have been cut off from feeling emotions and feeling sadness and from their caretaking. And so many men would be much better off if they were allowed to exhibit their sadness and
Yeah.
show their emotion, which we're not allowing them to do. So
Yeah.
gosh,
No.
Elise, this has been the most awesome interview. And I would talk with you for hours. But
Thank
we
you for
have to
having
wrap it
me.
up. What are you excited about that's coming up?
So I'm excited about a lot of things. I mean, my podcast and newsletter, which are both called Pulling the Thread. I'm actually working on a workbook for On Our Best Behavior, which I think you guys will dig. That comes out next year when the paperback comes out. And I think I'm working with a really good friend of mine who's an incredible coach, and actually very excited about it. I wasn't excited about doing a workbook because so many of them are sort of, I don't know, not that compelling. I wanted it to be a process, and we've made this process that I think is very rich. So yeah, I'm excited for the last days of summer, but your summer's over. That's wild.
Yeah. We're very thankful though, because it's 1:10 out. So our kids are stuck in the
Yeah.
house and can't do
It's kind of better.
anything.
This whole system too is so bad for moms and dads, but this 3 months of
Oh, I
no
could get into
programming where you have to then, it's not good.
I have so many things to say on that. I
We
have
should
so
probably
many-
do a
sure
whole
you
podcast
do.
episode about
Yeah.
this,
so
actually.
many things to say.
We
But thank you so much for joining us, Elise, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
I mean, I say this after so many of our guests because we're so lucky to have them, but I could have talked to her for much, much longer. She has the most fascinating topic, and it relates so closely to what we see women going through in our own lives and to some of the things I've had to overcome, as well as you've told me too, your thought process going along.
Oh, yeah,
with it.
yeah. And, we've got a link in our show notes because she has a quiz that you can take that kind of helps guide you through, what are those, the 7 deadly sins, which ones actually motivate you or not motivate you. What's the word I'm looking for? Drive
You're affected by
Yeah.
drive you.
Yeah. And my biggest one that affected me that I had was gluttony. I view gluttony as a sin, and as a result, you deny your body's signals. Oh, hell yeah, that is me. That is me to a T. I just want to read a couple of the questions. I can easily point to which part or parts of my body I dislike or wish were shaped or sized differently. I find myself saying things like, I was so bad today, or I was so good today, in reference to the types of foods and the amounts of foods I've eaten.
I think I've told you before the story she shared in the book, in the gluttony chapter, about the little yearly contest between her dad and her mom, where they bet each other the allowance they usually spend during the year. Whoever could be within a pound of their weight the year before got to spend their allowance. And her mom would always work so hard, scrimp and deny herself and not eat just so she wouldn't gain the weight. And her dad was like, this is easy. I could just have a burger. I could just have some
bite
fries.
me.
And no weight gain. And how much women have to push themselves into these boxes to be acceptable.
Don't even get me started on the weight gain of perimenopause, menopause. That's not fair. That's just no.
No, that's not fair.
But yeah,
That's not
that
fair.
quiz was very, very interesting. So
Yeah, as I was going through it, oh my gosh, I said sloth is something. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I could see how this plays out in my life. If I'm not busy doing something, I feel like I am worthless and lazy. Like
Ugh.
those are the things I'm saying to myself. I'm like, I just can't relax. I can't relax. This has to be done. This has to be done. This has to be done. And I'm like, how did I get that way? Oh, the seven deadly sins. And it's how
Yeah,
I've been
because she
programmed.
makes a
Got it.
really good point in there. She was talking about how, like, after a long day, men, there's often nothing bad perceived typically when a man's like, I've got to come home and I've got to rest. I've got to recharge my battery. I've got to recap. I've got to, decompress everything that's been going on. And so he has to rest and reprieve. But if a woman does that for the night, like, why is she not cleaning the dishes? Why is she not helping the kids get ready for bed? Why is she not like,
Or what's wrong with her that she doesn't have the energy to do these tasks? Like, what did she do during the day? Like, the fact that the dishes aren't done already, why aren't they done already? Like, you should have done that earlier. Like, that's the thinking that
Yeah.
gets me
Yeah.
so often, that prevents me from resting because I don't think like I have a productive use of my time. And I think that a lot of women fall into that camp too.
right? And we're saying that it's like, it's not just a you thing and it's not just a partner thing. Like, it's a societal thing. But what I love is how, like, at the end, we do have control over it. There's tangible things that we can
Yes.
do. Every situation is different for every person. So we can't say this one thing is going to work, but you can make a difference. You can change the line of thought. And I've already been seeing it. I try really hard with my kids because I have a boy and a girl and they're both teens. And I try really, really hard to kind of help break that sexist thought process, that what I've seen in these deadly sins, like trying to make sure that they don't view things
To get
that
into
way.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting, like the envy thing that she was talking about. Have you ever heard of a pick me girl?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of along those lines, right? It's
Yeah.
the envy thing. Like when people call them a pick me girl, it's like, what is that girl doing that is unsocietally acceptable? Is she like putting herself out there? Is she saying she wants something? Is that why she's a pick me girl?
Right.
Mm,
Okay.
could be.
As someone who I feel like in some cases as a kid was a pick me girl,
Mhm.
and not saying that I'm not now necessarily, but I mean, I can definitely look back on me in school, especially in elementary school, and be like, that was so.
I'm a total pick me girl and I own it and I love it. And I
Well,
think
I'm going to
everyone should
say,
be
like,
pick me
for
girls.
sure, when I was in elementary school, sometimes it's a coping mechanism, for God's sakes. I didn't have the attention span to sit there while somebody else was doing stuff. Like, pick me.
Yeah.
I want to be involved because this is the only way I can, like, focus. Hello,
Mhm.
ADHD. Hi, how you doing?
Yep,
Hi.
but you're not supposed to want anything, Brie.
I
You're
know.
supposed to
Oh, I
just
know,
go
right?
with
And
the
I did. I got
flow.
teased so much by some of my classmates for being you're such
The
a
one who's out
teacher's
there.
pet. Why do you always
Uh-huh.
want to do it? Why do you always volunteer? And I'm like, I don't know. How do you
And
like
women
sitting
do
there at your
that.
desk all day and not doing anything? Like,
Women do that today too,
we
and I
do.
find it so like icky. I find it so icky. In fact, now though, I'm
Cringy.
not afraid of it like I used to be. When I see other women say that about me, I honestly have to say, like in like new groups of women, I do think about it before I put myself out there. I'm like, oh, is this going to be like seen as too bossy to like take charge to, who does she think she is?
Yeah.
And then I mentally check it and I'm like, I'm gonna do
Don't
it
give a crap.
anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And if those people do see it that way, you know what? They're not my people, and they're not ready to be around me. And just saying that out loud sounds almost incredibly like really scary because like
Goes
there's
against
a
what you've
lot of
been
people
taught.
out there who probably judge women like that, who are like, I don't really care. Like they don't get to be around me. And it's taken so much intentional work to get to that place. And I have to say, like, it is so much better here than it was when I was like in constant people pleasing mode.
Come join us. It's a
Yes.
much better
Yeah.
spot.
It's much better. You can still be kind, but you don't put up with much crap. It's really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, you know what? If you enjoyed this episode, if you had your mind blown, do us a favor and leave us a review, leave us some feedback, and let us know what you thought of the episode. We love to hear what you guys think. I want to know, again, who had their mind blown as much as I did. And also, like, what of those deadly sins are you like, oh, snap? That totally directs my motivation and my thought process.
And
So,
please, share this with a friend. If you have a friend who needs to hear this message, just click the little link in whatever podcast platform you're in and just text it over to them, because this is so important that we get this out to all women to know, so that they start thinking about why they feel the way they do about things. It's so good.
oh, and I wanted to add a note. Like, she talked about, and I'm forgetting his name at the beginning of the podcast, who started all of this and how he was kind of seen also as the father of enneagrams.
The monk. I don't remember.
Enneagrams?
Yeah.
Enneagrams. And if you like Enneagrams, and that got you too, and that blew your mind as well, next week we have a podcast guest who talks about Enneagrams and how you can use them in your parenting. So this is actually a
Oh.
great lead-in.
Yes.
love it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So until next time, remember, the best mom's a happy mom. Take care of you, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for stopping by.